Dear all of my students, let's start today with the material related to chapter 14, which is IT security management and risk assessment. When we go with the security as a global view, we have to understand with each other that the security is not only the security mechanisms and algorithms which is used for encryption and decryption or authentication or access control or whatever. It means that the security consists of different component, different category. Then we have security as a security technique, which is using the algorithms and the mechanisms for encryption and other security services. And then we have what we call administrative security, which is the security policy and security management. Also, we have what we call physical and infrastructure security. And also we have what we call human resource security. Then as a global view for the security, then we have what we call technical security, administrative security, physical and infrastructure security, and human resource security. May we can add later what we call security cost. From the cost point of view, we have what we call financial security cost and performance security cost. Let's go start here with our class today, which is one of the security component, which is security management and risk assessment, which is coming under the what we call administrative security. If you go with the security management, then we have multiple questions or group of questions which is requested before we go with the security management. Then what assets need to be protected? Here it is. What assets need to be protected? How are these assets threatened? What can be done to counter those threats? This is a group of questions which is asked when we go with the security. Then when we come to the security management, this is coming to answer these questions. Then what assets need to be protected? How are these assets threatened? What can done to counter these assets? Let's go here. IT security management, formal process of answering the questions. It means that the IT security management is the formal process of answering these three questions here, which ensure that critical assets are sufficiently protected in a cost-effective manner. This is cost-effective manner, which we call security cost. Security risk assessment is needed for each asset in the organization that requires protection. It means that through your organization, you have an asset, and each asset should have risk assessment inside the organization to protect these assets. Then provide information. The security management provide information necessary to decide what management, operational, and technical control are needed to reduce the risk identified. Then when we go with the risk analysis, then we have to identify what level of security you are looking for as a information necessary to decide what management, security management, operational management, and operational security, technical security, control, are needed to reduce that risk identified. It means that when we start with the security management, then it's a formal process to answer these questions here for protecting our infrastructure or our organization. Let's go here. When we go with the security management, then we will go with each other as a outline for the material covered in this chapter, which is related to the security management. We will go with each other about the overview for the security management and the best practice. And also we will go with the security risk assessment, how to make a risk assessment through our organization. We will go with each other through the baseline approach, risk assessment, informal approach, risk assessment, detailed risk analysis, and combined approach for the risk assessment. We will see with each other that these different risk assessment is related to how the sensitivity of your information and also how the size of your organization. Then we will continue with each other for the definition of the threats, definition for the vulnerability. Let's go as a different definition. We will see with each other. What is assets? What is threats? What's vulnerability? And what's at risk? When we talk about these terminology through our organization, we see that assets, anything that have value to the organization. Threats, a potential cause of an unwanted incident which may result in harm to a system or organization. Vulnerability, it's a weakness in an assets or group of assets which can be exploited by threats. And risk, the potential that a given threats will exploit vulnerability of an assets or group of assets to cause loss of that or damage to the assets, which is coming here. Let's go for that terminology before we start. Here it is. This is the terminology we have to care about during going with the security management. We have what we call assets, threats, vulnerability, and risk. That's fine. Let's go back with the start here with the security as a IT security management. Then we go here with IT security management as a definition. IT security management is a process used to achieve and maintain appropriate level of confidentiality, integrity, availability, accountability, authenticity, and reliability. IT security management function include. Then when you go back for that definition here, when you talk about confidentiality, integrity, availability, accountability, authenticity, and reliability, these all of the what we call security services. We would like to maintain appropriate level for that security services. Then the IT security management functions include to maintain that appropriate level of the security services. Then the IT management have a function which determine organizational IT security objective, strategies, and policy. Then the IT security management, one of the function is to determine organizational IT security objective. What is the objective of the security? What is the strategy of the security? And what is the policy of the organization security? And also the IT security management determine organizational IT security requirement. What is the IT security requirement to protect our organization? This is also one of the function for the IT security management. We have also identifying and analyzing security threats to IT assets within the organization. Then one of the function of the IT security management to identify and analyze security threats. We define the security threats through the terminology, and also identifying and analyzing risk. What is the risk analysis for each threats to any of our assets? Specifying appropriate safeguard, and then monitoring and implementing an operation of safeguard. It means that starting from determine the organization's IT objective, strategy, and policy, and specifying his safeguard, and monitoring the operation, develop and implementing security awareness program, and detecting and reacting to the incidents. It means that detecting what is threats happen or attacking happen, and how to react against that incident for our organization. It means that when you go with the administrative security as a security, IT security management, this is the function should be implemented by this security management by the end to keep our organization or protect our organization against any threats from outside. When we go here with each other as a security, then we have to define what's meant by security policy. Needs to address. This is security policy address these items here. And then management support. IT security. We need IT security policy must be supported by senior management, which we need IT security officer. And for the big organization, we need IT project security officers. Then more and more control. Manage security policy within their area. As a security risk assessment, before we go with the risk assessment here, then let's go with the terminology as we said. We said that we have assets, threats, vulnerability, and risk. Let's go here. This is assets identification. Last component is to identify assets to examine, which is anything that need to be protected. The assets is anything need to be protected. The assets which have value to organization to meet its objective. These assets can be tangible or not, intangible. Tangible, which is say looks like the hardware. Tangible, intangible, which like the software. Whose compromise or loss would seriously impact the operational of the organization. It means that the compromise of these assets or loss of these assets would seriously impact the operational or the operation of our organization. Also, when we continue here with the threats identification, the threats here is defined as anything that might hinder or prevent an asset from providing appropriate level of the key security services. It means that the threats here, which is anything that might hinder or prevent the assets, which is defined before, from providing appropriate level of key security services. This is the key security services, which is defined by the ISO standard, which is integrity, reliability, confidentiality, authenticity, accountability, and availability. Also, we define here the vulnerability identification, and let's go with the security risk assessment. When you go with the security risk assessment here, we have baseline, informal, detailed,